Imagine two cities where wickedness was so extreme that no human solution could save them. A place where violence, corruption, and contempt for any sense of morality had reached an irreversible point. Sodom and Gomorrah, as well known as Jerusalem or Bethlehem, did not just disappear from history. They were completely erased by divine wrath. Nothing remained. No buildings, no trees, not even a single human life to tell what happened. But what was so severe? What sins led these cities to such a devastating fate? And more importantly, what can this story teach us today? If you think you know everything about Sodom and Gomorrah, prepare to be surprised, because we are about to uncover the dark secrets of these cities and understand why they became the ultimate example of God's judgment. Stay until the end, because this video will reveal an unexpected connection between this story and the challenges we face today. Sodom and Gomorrah are not just names casually mentioned in the Bible. They have become symbols of moral decadence and divine justice. According to the book of Genesis, these cities were located in a fertile region, but marked by corruption and sin. They existed during the time of the patriarchs, in the days of Abraham and his nephew Lot. But what really happened for them to be destroyed so definitively? The biblical text tells us that God heard the cries for justice from those who suffered due to the wickedness dominating Sodom and Gomorrah. Imagine the gravity of the situation. Desperate people, with no way out, crying out for divine intervention. The Bible describes this wickedness as so intense that it reached the heavens, demanding an immediate response. To investigate, God sent two angels to the cities, but what they found was so alarming that there was no choice but total destruction. Did you know that Abraham tried to intercede for the cities? He asked God to spare Sodom and Gomorrah if at least 50 righteous people could be found there. Then he reduced the number to 10. However, not even those 10 righteous people were found. The wickedness was so widespread that there was no hope. This brings us to the big question: what were the sins of these cities? And what can we learn from this story? One of the most mentioned sins of these cities is rampant wickedness. But what does this mean exactly? The Bible gives us clues. Acts of violence, cruelty, deceit, and total disrespect for others were common practices. The residents of Sodom and Gomorrah lived so far from God that they not only ignored his existence but openly defied his commandments. Additionally, idolatry was also part of the daily life of these cities. Devotion to wealth, power, and earthly pleasures replaced any connection with the Creator. And here's something interesting. Idolatry is not just about worshiping statues or images. It's about giving the first place in your life to something other than God. This behavior not only distanced people from the truth, but also fueled the moral corruption that dominated Sodom and Gomorrah. And you might wonder, what led these cities to fall so far? The answer might lie in the abundance they enjoyed. The Bible states that Sodom and Gomorrah were prosperous, but instead of using this prosperity for good, they chose arrogance and disdain for the needy. In a world where idleness and excess took over, moral values were abandoned, and decadence became the norm. Now that we understand the context of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, let us explore the sins that led to their ultimate judgment. The Bible mentions that God heard the cries of the oppressed, a plea so desperate that it could not be ignored. But what exactly happened there that was so severe? One of the most highlighted points is the rampant wickedness that dominated these cities. Violence and cruelty were not isolated incidents, but a way of life. Deceit, torture, murder, and a total lack of compassion for others turned Sodom and Gomorrah into places where no one was safe. These attitudes not only harmed other people, but openly challenged God's goodness and justice. Another crucial aspect was idolatry. For the residents of Sodom and Gomorrah, power, wealth, and material pleasures were more important than any spiritual connection. They worshipped these things as if they were gods, further distancing themselves from the Creator. And here's a warning. Idolatry does not always mean worshiping statues or images. It can be found in any attitude that places material goods or personal desires above God. The Bible also gives us an important detail. Sodom and Gomorrah were prosperous. Their lands were fertile, and the inhabitants had an abundance of resources. But instead of using these blessings to help those in need, they chose the path of arrogance and selfishness. Ezekiel 16:49 summarizes this bluntly. This was the sin of your sister Sodom. Pride, excess of food, and prosperous ease, but she did not aid the poor and the needy. This combination of wealth and lack of purpose created an environment of moral decay. Idleness, living without noble goals, paved the way for other sins, such as vanity, arrogance, and contempt for others. The inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah were so distant from divine values that their hearts became hardened, rendering them incapable of seeking redemption. Another event that illustrates the corruption of these cities was the arrival of the two angels sent by God. They were received in Lot's house, but the situation quickly turned chaotic. The men of the city surrounded the house, demanding that Lot hand over the visitors so they could abuse them. This scene is a clear reflection of how Sodom and Gomorrah had become places dominated by violence and perversion. Lot, desperate, tried to protect the angels, even going so far as to offer his own daughters to pacify the crowd. Although this gesture is shocking to us today, in the culture of that time, hospitality was sacred, and Lot felt morally obligated to protect his guests at all costs. However, this also reveals how even people considered righteous could make misguided decisions when living in such a corrupt society. In the face of such depravity, the angels intervened to protect Lot and his family. They blinded the men surrounding the house and warned Lot of the imminent destruction of the cities. Urgently, they instructed Lot to flee with his family and not look back. This warning was not only physical but also symbolic. Looking back meant clinging to a past that God had condemned. Even so, as they fled, Lot's wife disobeyed and looked back, being turned into a pillar of salt. This act of disobedience serves as a powerful reminder of how attachment to sin can prevent us from moving forward into a better future. The sins of Sodom and Gomorrah were not just isolated acts of wickedness, but a complete system of moral corruption, arrogance, and disregard for God. These cities became an eternal example of the consequences of living far from divine ways. However, the story also shows us God's mercy, as he was willing to spare the cities if at least 10 righteous people could be found. The conclusion of the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is as impactful as the narrative that brought us here. After the angels warned Lot and his family about the imminent destruction, they gave clear instructions: flee immediately, and above all, do not look back. This command, seemingly simple, carries profound symbolism. It was not just about physically escaping, but also about leaving behind any emotional or spiritual ties to that place of corruption. However, as we know, Lot's wife disobeyed. When she looked back, she was transformed into a pillar of salt. Why? This gesture, seemingly small, showed attachment to the past and to the life that God was condemning. It is a powerful reminder that, to move forward, we must let go of what ties us to sin. Her disobedience is a lesson for all of us. Attachment to the wrong things can paralyze us and prevent us from reaching the future that God has prepared. When judgment finally came, it was definitive and devastating. Genesis describes that God rained fire and brimstone on Sodom and Gomorrah. The cities were completely destroyed, reduced to ashes. No building, tree, or living being survived. It was as if they had never existed. This annihilation was not only physical, but also symbolic, an eternal testimony of divine justice against extreme wickedness. It is interesting to compare the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah with another historical tragedy, the city of Pompeii in Italy, which was buried by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. Both stories involve total and sudden destruction. However, while Pompeii was the victim of an unpredictable natural force, Sodom and Gomorrah faced the conscious and direct judgment of God. This contrast makes us reflect on the difference between natural events and divine interventions. In Pompeii, the volcanic eruption was an inevitable disaster, part of the workings of the physical world. In Sodom and Gomorrah, however, the destruction was a specific response to human behavior, a direct consequence of rejecting God and His commandments. Although the causes are different, both stories have something in common. They serve as warnings. They remind us of the fragility of life and the importance of living according to principles that promote goodness, justice, and truth. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is not just an ancient account. it has direct implications for the challenges we face in the modern world. We live in a society where the pursuit of power, pleasure, and wealth often outweighs moral and spiritual values. Idolatry, which in Sodom was expressed through the worship of material goods and earthly pleasures, manifests similarly today, often disguised as ambition or success. Furthermore, the issue of idleness remains relevant. When we live without a clear purpose, we open the door to arrogance, selfishness, and a lack of empathy. Abundance without gratitude or generosity can easily lead to moral decay, as happened with the inhabitants of Sodom. Another crucial point is the impact of our choices and associations. Just as Lot was influenced by the corrupt environment in which he lived, we too can be affected by the people and situations around us. It is essential to choose wisely where and with whom we invest our time and energy. One of the most striking aspects of the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is the pride that marked its inhabitants. They not only committed acts of wickedness, but did so with pride, without any remorse. This same attitude can be seen in our world today, when people or entire societies ignore the consequences of their actions and promote a culture of unrestrained self-sufficiency. Additionally, indifference toward the needy is a lesson that strongly resonates today. Ezekiel 16:49 emphasizes that despite its abundance, Sodom neglected the poor and the needy. In a world where many have abundance but few share, this message challenges us to rethink how we use our resources and how we relate to others. Lot's wife's attitude, looking back, also serves as a powerful reminder for all of us. How often do we remain trapped in the past, preventing ourselves from moving forward? Whether through emotional attachment, resentment, or even an inability to let go of old habits, this attitude can limit us from reaching what God has planned for our lives. The challenge here is to trust God to lead us onto a new path, even if it means leaving behind things that seemed comfortable or familiar. Like Lot and his daughters who moved forward, we are called to walk toward God's purpose without looking back. Another inspiring aspect of this story is Abraham's role as an intercessor. His conversation with God, asking for mercy for Sodom and Gomorrah if there were righteous people in the cities, teaches us about the importance of prayer and empathy. Even in the face of a corrupt society, Abraham did not give up on interceding. This attitude is a powerful example for us. Instead of merely criticizing or condemning the wrongs we see around us, we are called to pray for others, seeking their transformation and God's grace. Just like Abraham, we can make a difference by being channels of mercy and compassion. The story of Lot also shows us the impact of our choices. By choosing to live in Sodom, he exposed himself to a corrupt culture that influenced even his decisions. While God showed mercy by saving Lot, his initial choice brought difficult consequences for him and his family. This reminds us that the choices we make today can have profound effects on the future. Whether it is about the people we associate with, the values we adopt, or the paths we follow, each decision has the power to bring us closer to or further from God. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah is not just a story of judgment, but an invitation to reflection and transformation. It challenges us to evaluate our own lives, identify areas where we may be distant from God, and seek change before it is too late. However, this narrative also reminds us of divine mercy. Even in the midst of corruption and decay, God was willing to spare the cities if there were a small number of righteous people. This gives us hope that regardless of how far we may feel, there is still room for repentance and restoration. If this story has touched you in any way, do not hesitate to share your opinion in the comments. And remember, this channel is a space for us to grow together, learn more about God's Word, and reflect on how to apply it in our daily lives. Before you go, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell so you won't miss any content. Oh, and there's an amazing video appearing on the screen right now that I'm sure you'll love to watch. Thank you for watching Illuminated Minutes, and may God bless you and your family. See you next time.